representative questioners. Ms. Mace, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to conclude with?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses once again for their time today. And in hearing our witnesses this afternoon and this morning, I think the idea of censorship is a far more important issue than the issue of state superintendents of education, state boards of education, local county boards of education, and parents doing what is legally and rightfully theirs to determine is how their kids are educated in their communities. So when you look at this issue and you look at some of the censorship that's happening on college campuses, as we heard today from Dr. Pedlushny, I said it's very difficult to say your name, but thank you for being here today. But that kind of censorship on social media, that is far more dangerous than what we're hearing, I think, from our witnesses today. And I've experienced it myself. You know, part of the American experiment is being able to have a debate of ideas, to have this exchange of ideas and not get attacked for it. But we're seeing conservatives and some on the far left and far right being attacked every single day in this country. And the censorship and this erasure is not being applied equally. I know that Kremlin is tweeting on Twitter right now. We're banning conservatives from Twitter, and yet the Kremlin can still tweet today. And if you're going to have a standard, apply it equally across all users on social media. And complaining that parents go to school boards to have their voices heard is wrong. Accusing schools and saying that there's no safe place to go read in the classroom or the library. That should be the safest place to read. And so this is, I think, not an accurate representation of what's truly going on. But at the same time, we want to have folks like Ruby Bridges having her voices heard. There are so many Black voices, so many LGBTQ voices, too, that have the right to be heard at the same time. But the questioning of speech and looking at that from that perspective, even Bernie Sanders, because I read a story earlier today from Daniel Moran's on Huffington Post, who's sitting in the room today, quoted Bernie Sanders not too long ago, that people have a right to give their 2 cents worth, give a speech without fear of violence, intimidation, etc. And yet today we have that going on. We had the end of a 2020 election where mainstream media wouldn't talk about the business that Hunter Biden was doing, wouldn't talk about the emails that were on his laptop, and wouldn't talk about some of the I would say allegedly shady work that he was doing, and whether or not his father was a part of that, and doing it at the tail end of an election. And so we see that every day. There was some citation earlier about kids not feeling safe because of their LGBTQ status. Mental health and mental issues are up. Depression and anxiety has been up by 25% over the last 2 years because of COVID-19. That is a statistic from the World Health Organization. I've seen it in my own family with my own children who have suffered because they were not in school. They were in virtual school. And I've seen some children that haven't been able to get it back. I've seen increase in drug use from kids who don't even have the ability to drive right now. And so when we're having these conversations about anxiety and depression of our students, I hope that we can have a broader discussion of how keeping our kids out of schools has actually harmed them over the last 2 years. And I just want to lastly say it again, Mr. Raskin, even though we sometimes disagree, we always agree to disagree, and I love the debate that we have in the Civil Rights Subcommittee on Oversight, and I want to thank you all for your time and being here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for
and
that.
I yield back.
Thank you so much for that excellent conclusion and for making sure you'd be here with us today to participate in this. And I've got a few closing thoughts of my own. First, I want to thank our extraordinary witnesses, beginning with the students who were with us on the first panel. But I want to thank Samantha Hall, who's a librarian from the great Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, Mindy Freeman, who's a parent from Bucks County, PA, and we thank you so much for being with us along with your daughter. And Dr. Jonathan Pedlushny, who's with the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, and Jessica Berg, who's a teacher in neighboring Loudoun County, Virginia. I also was very moved by the testimony and the seriousness with which all of you have approached a really important topic. And I just had a few cleanup thoughts I wanted to advance before we close. One is on the question of the fine old lost art of American heckling. I got heckled yesterday by our colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene on the floor of the House, And it was totally fine with me. I think they were about to gavel her down or tell her she had to be removed. It was, you know, she was yelling at me, but she left some oxygen and space for me to respond. And I did. And that kind of heckling, you know, if you go back and read the Lincoln-Douglas debates, there's a great compendium of the Lincoln-Douglas debates by an historian named Harold Holzer. But he includes the heckling that took place, and people would yell things out, and then Lincoln and Douglas would respond to them, and sometimes it would launch a whole new, discussion between the two of them. That kind of heckling is fine for me. The kind that I think we saw in one of the tapes where people are actually trying to shut people up and shut down the event, that strikes me as not within the spirit of the First Amendment, much less something like we saw on January 6th, which was the ultimate act of censorship. The ultimate expression of cancel culture was what took place on January 6th, where 900 people entered this building unlawfully, evading the metal detectors, evading the officers, actually wounding and injuring 160 of our officers, smashing them in the face with baseball bats and American flags and Confederate battle flags and so on. That, to me, was the essence of cancel culture. They were trying to cancel out our whole democracy on that day. They were trying to cancel out the whole Constitution. So I was not happy to see the relatively trivial violence before on the video at all. I don't think anybody was, wounded or given post-traumatic stress syndrome or killed in that kind of violence, but I wasn't happy to see it. And I'm not happy to see a form of heckling which is really just shutting down other people's ability to speak. The second thing I want to say, and we were about to get through the hearing so well on a great bipartisan commitment to the First Amendment, but I did want to respond to my friend Jim Jordan. I don't know if he's still out there somewhere. I'm sorry that he left the room, but it's very easy to feel that your group is somehow being unfairly targeted and made a victim. And I've spoken before to the distinguished gentleman from Ohio about this. He seems to believe that conservatives are somehow uniquely the victims of what he calls cancel culture. We've already heard from some people today, students, teacher, librarian, mom, about the actual attempts to strip books from people's libraries, and we heard from the great Ruby Bridges about the extraordinary and shocking effort to censor her books and remove them from public libraries in an attempt to silence the critical experience, the formative experience for our lives of the civil rights movement, affecting everybody, not just the African American community, not just the Latino community, the Asian American community, but the people in the white community, people all across the board. This is the American story. And so I guess what I'd like to say is I think that we're going to advance the First Amendment values that all of us hold dear if we can step a little bit beyond our own sense of grievance and indignation that somehow we are the first people ever to feel the sting of being marginalized. I know that conservatives feel marginalized. I think Oberlin is sometimes mentioned as a school, just like conservatives feel, liberals feel marginalized sometimes at George Mason University, or conservatives can feel marginalized at Wesleyan perhaps, and liberals can feel marginalized at the University of Chicago, okay? So let's try to maintain a sense of balance about that, and we can talk about how to improve the climate for everybody. I think it's within the spirit of First Amendment values that we want to give everybody the right to speak and to participate and to try to respect them as much as possible, as Ms. Berg said. And finally, as to the point raised by my friend, Ms. Mace, and I think a couple of the other members raised this too, we do have a kind of a tension or a balance in our public schools, and by the way, our public universities too, between individual freedom and democracy. There is no doubt that we have democratic mechanisms like school boards and state legislatures and county education superintendents who are involved in the preparation of curriculum. That is a function of democracy. And at the same time, under our First Amendment, the Supreme Court has said, and certainly the people feel, our students, our teachers, don't shed their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. And so we have to try to reconcile those two values. All I would say about the current attempt to demonize and vilify people on school boards, teachers, librarians, is they are the democratic culture along with our PTAs and our parents. They are the people that have been put in by the voters all across America. They're doing a hell of a job, I think. And so just because someone decides that they want to go on a book-banning rampage or expedition doesn't mean suddenly that everybody who's been elected to the school boards or everybody who's in office or everybody who's head of the PTA is somehow the enemy of the people. I don't accept that. I think that the teachers, the librarians, the PTA people, the school officials are doing their very best to reconcile all of these values in a democratic society. And the First Amendment is there to protect all of us. And the Supreme Court, I think, has been real clear about viewpoint discrimination, whether at the higher education level. Check out Board of Rectors versus University of Virginia, I think it's called, in the Rosenberger case, where, no, you can't discriminate against religious student groups that want to get money to publish their newspaper. They've got an equal right to the Republicans and the Democrats and the liberals and the conservatives. Just because you're a religious group that's publishing a newspaper doesn't mean you can be discriminated against. But the Supreme Court's also been equally clear in the K through 12 context, while curricular materials have to be age appropriate. You can't take books out of the library because somebody else doesn't like it. And I'll just end with that image I started with. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, it's like an apple. And everybody just wants to take one bite out of the apple. And if we let everybody take one bite of the apple, there's nothing left to it. So we've got to defend not just the speech we love and the speech we agree with, but also the speech that might force us to learn something new, or the speech that we think we really detest and we despise. That's what the First Amendment is about. I want to thank the great Ruby Bridges for gracing us today. It means so much to us to have had you with us. And Ms. Hull, Ms. Friedman, Mr. Poludny, forgive me, and Ms. Berg, all the students, everybody participating, thank you for this important investment in American freedom. And the meeting's now adjourned. Witnesses will have 5 days to get us any changes to their testimony, and members will have 5 days within which to submit additional written questions for the witnesses to the chair, and we'll send them to you if people have further questions, and please respond to them as quickly as you can. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Ms. Bridges, you changed my daughter's life when she met you in Alabama.